Greetings YouTube, this is Remarkable Republican here once again to bring you the truth with a truth-flavored bias. Tonight we are taking a look at a new film called Good Boys. This movie is the story of three boys who go to recover a downed drone, but along the way are supposed to become men and learn life lessons. As I'll show, it is not about young boys becoming men, but more about the commie and queer agenda of Hollywood being imposed upon three youths who are taken out of control of their own lives by the leftist agenda. But while Hollywood goes so far left with this movie, tonight I want to bring it back right and show exactly why this pile of garbage is degenerate filth and why it is the perfect example of the commie and queer agenda in action in Hollywood. I think it's worthwhile to just simply state the basic problem and then go through all of the details later. The basic problem with Good Boys is that it is supposed to be about young men growing up and becoming responsible adults. They do attempt to be responsible by trying to replace the destroyed drone. However, instead of learning a lesson and becoming better young men for that, they instead are diverted from their objective and the movie turns them into degenerates overnight. In reality, when you grow up, it's a long process, but in this movie, it is oversimplified and these boys become men, or at least this movie's really fucked up version of what a man is, within maybe 2 or 3 days at most. So this is a gross simplification of the process of adolescence, and it also implies that degenerate behavior is acceptable so long as you're young, when in reality the Bible makes no such exceptions, and degenerate behavior is not to be excused in anyone of any age. This movie has three main characters. I call them characters in the loosest sense of the word. They are also known as the Beanbag Boys, that is their sort of group name. They hang out together in the rooms on beanbags. That was their elementary school thing. But now they're growing up and going to middle school. These characters are not so much characters as metaphors for communist and homosexual ideas, as I will show throughout this video. Let's meet our so-called characters. There's Max, the young Casanova in the making. He is a shallow collector of women, and over the course of the film we see him go from being an idealist who thinks he will find his future wife to just a guy who dates whoever happens to be available and plays around a lot with girls' feelings. There's Thor, another character. He is an obvious homosexual opera fan. He wears earrings, and his parents are S&M aficionados. We never explore the homosexual aspect of his character, but I think that any reasonably observant person who watches this film will have to conclude that Thor is in fact a homosexual. There's also Lucas. He's a large, strong black boy who plays Tamagotchi and Magic rather than football and basketball. He is effectively going along an SJW character arc that would probably be true regardless of how the movie plays out based on the way that his character is written. However, this movie pushes him along that arc at an accelerated pace, and he never has a chance to see through the lies of the communist left. He also seems like someone who would grow up to become a future homosexual activist, or perhaps some sort of democratic so-called strategist who goes on TV to talk about how Hillary Clinton is great and how Donald Trump's tweets made him cry. This film openly and shamelessly promotes child abuse. There are at least 3 major scenes where adults abuse children in an unequivocal way, and they are not punished at all for their crimes. And yes, these are crimes. First of all, Max's dad leaves him alone for 2 days with just a note. There is no other provider present. Max is a 6th grader. He should not be alone for that period of time. A lot of what happens to Max and his friends is the fault of Max's dad. In fact, you could say the entire plot is the fault of Max's dad. You could even argue that he is the main character since he causes all of this to happen. Max fears his father's wrath so much that he lies to him and commits felonies such as trying to sell drugs rather than admitting the truth to his father. This means that the odds that Max's father is physically abusive are astronomically high. It goes without saying that Max's father is a bad person and a terrible father. There's also one scene where they get into a fist fight with a bunch of full-grown frat guys, and one of the frat boys punches Thor in the face full blast. Thor is a little bruised and he's shaken up, but he's not really hurt. And that's highly unlikely because Thor is basically a chubby Justin Bieber, and this frat guy was fairly big. Also, he's a grown man. Thor is just a boy. And the unrealistic thing is that this frat guy is not punished at all. The truth is, despite leftist propaganda, that frat guys are kept on a very short leash, and they are tightly disciplined by their respective universities, and they also have very high ethical standards that they hold each other to. So this would never happen. If this guy did haul off and punch a kid, he would not only be kicked out of college and his frat, but he would probably face a few years in jail, or at least some kind of probation and then being banned from school zones or something like that. Good Boys has a strong and undeniable socialist and/or anti-business bias. In Good Boys, sixth graders repeatedly have easy access to alcohol. This implies a lot of things. First, business owners apparently don't care about the well-being of children. They can go into gas stations and engage in suspicious activity and then walk out with beer smuggled in their pants or their jacket. This is apparently something that a lot of them do on the regular. A cop is actually off-duty hanging out in this convenience store and sees Thor stealing beer, but rather than arresting him or stopping him, the cop simply asks him to stop because he's tired. This really paints cops as irresponsible and people who do not uphold the morality of their community. This is completely unacceptable and it's totally unrealistic. Most good cops would care about kids in their community, and they would want to prevent them from growing up to be thugs, so they would stop them in their tracks and try to put them on the right path while they still have time. The parents are the worst offenders of all, however. They seem largely unconcerned about what their kids do at parties, and they also allow their kids to have access to alcohol, either because they give it to them or else because they don't keep track of their own beer. This really implies that these kids can't rely on their parents for moral instruction, and instead they should have to turn to the government. Bernie Sanders wants to send social workers into every American home, and this movie is effectively a Bernie 2020 campaign ad. This movie and its producer Seth Rogen should have to reclassify themselves as political activists who are working to get Bernie elected president. This is outright propaganda at its most vile. The second most disturbing scene of the movie, we'll get to the first one in due time, is when the kids cross the interstate and effectively play Frogger in live time. Now, first of all, the first thing that comes to my mind is that these kids should be old enough to not do something this stupid. Surely they have played Frogger, but also surely they have some survival instincts by the age of 12 or so. And apparently only Thor had the sense to know that getting hit by a car would not be a good idea. Not one driver stopped to let them pass, and none of the motorists called the highway patrol or fire department. So people saw these kids and just honked their horns at them and got mad, when it's clear that these kids are exactly that, kids, and not just hobos or adults who can take their own chances. I mean, if an adult decides to cross the interstate and gets hit, that's on that person, and there is no victim there. But if a kid does it, then it kind of is up to the adults driving their cars to be responsible and not hit that person. What this shows once again is the movie's central message that adults are not moral and that they do not care about the morality or well-being of children. So again, this is a Bernie Sanders propaganda campaign video. This movie should just be part of his campaign, and they should just show this at his rallies rather than having him yell into the microphone and go hoarse. In nature, it is universally true that women become nurturing and motherly after they hit puberty. That's not to say all women do that, but most women do. That is what is unlocked in them by nature and adolescence. Yet when we meet two teenage girls who are clearly well into puberty, they're about 16-ish, they not only do not provide any help to the three boys, but in fact they are a bad moral influence, and they attempt to really wreck these guys at first especially. These budding harlots plant the seeds which broke up the Beanbag Boys. They told them that people tend not to be friends with the people that they went to elementary school with, and they go their own way. Now, that may very well have happened to the Beanbag Boys, but these girls are the ones who really put the seed of destruction into their friendship. Had these girls just let them live their lives and learn their own lessons, these guys could have remained friends a few more years, or they could have developed into more well-rounded people. By being told to go and fit into an SJW subgroup early in life, these boys did not get the chance to develop balance, and they didn't get the chance to develop complexity, so they became just stereotypes, as we'll see. These girls also use drugs and skip school, so they are not showing an accurate way of how you succeed in high school and then go on to get a good job. They are also clearly poorly parented. They are high at a party and none of the adults notice. And also they're dating frat guys, which is extremely unrealistic. Frat guys, as I said, are quite ethical, and they would not take a risk by dating underage girls. As for these girls, I could see why they would be interested in dating older guys who have access to, say, beer, and they have better cars and whatnot. But the fact is that most likely the relationship would be illegal, and again, I just don't think that these frat guys would endanger their promising futures by hanging out with a bunch of underage floozies. Another way in which this movie is socialist and attempts to undermine tradition and norms and social order is that it portrays frat brothers in an entirely negative light. You have to remember something about frat brothers. They are the future leaders of this country. And in this movie, they're portrayed in an entirely negative light and fully discredited before they ever have a chance to prove themselves in any way. The idea being that these are just white guys, straight white cis males, and that they are just bad and should never be trusted, and that they are just there to corrupt the youth and do drugs. But again, as I've said, this is not at all factual or accurate. Frat guys in real life do not deal drugs. They either come from good families, so they have money and don't need to make it by doing dumb shit, or they get a job. Frat guys would never get in a fight with preteen boys. Again, they would get in trouble for this, and frat guys, for the most part, are rather chill and would not allow themselves to be baited into a battle with a boy. Frat guys also are portrayed in this movie as being dumb, but that is actually a stereotype that is completely unfounded. Frat guys have to maintain passing grades, and they are not anywhere near as stupid as the movie portrays them. Sure, you could find a dumb frat guy here or there, no doubt, but most frat guys are actually smarter than your average college student, and that is a fact that is borne out by statistics over and over and over. Speaking of student organizations, another one that this movie portrays is called SCAB, Student Council Against Bullying. This is one of the most communist elements of the entire film. What bullies are there to combat, and where are they? There are no legitimate bullies in this movie. The girls are a bad influence and they try to recover their drugs from the boys, but they are not bullies in the normal sense because they don't attend the same school, and their bullying is objective based rather than just hazing in the more 80s bully way. We live in an era where there are no more bullies among kids. Bullying is dead. Yet this student council of nerds is going around trying to really just bully the popular kids anytime a popular kid might, say, criticize a nerd for being a nerd. What this is really about is trying to fight the idea of self-improvement. These kids are forming into an SJW cult that the movie tries to promote as noble and good. This is seen as a desirable social group, when in reality, these are kids who are incapable of ever getting laid once they reach adulthood. The kids all wear yellow vests, like the communist protesters in France. This is supposed to show solidarity with an extremist left-wing movement that is designed to take down the French government and institute a communist regime. It is a clear example of political virtue signaling by Hollywood director Seth Myers. So, this is what is going on with that whole organization. They are clearly intended to be a proto-revolutionary group, And of course, one of our main characters, as we'll see, falls prey to their propaganda and becomes one of their primary guys. The Frogger scene was pretty disturbing, but it pales in comparison to the kissing party. One of the kids, a rich Asian boy, was able to host a kissing party in his basement. His mom was wine drunk, and she was wandering around just saying that she hopes the kids aren't doing anything too bad, but she's not going to investigate. Why bother supervising your children to make sure they don't get themselves in trouble, especially when they're at the age when they're going to start having feelings and doing things that are rash. The kids, of course, get drunk on the beer that Thor provides, and then they pair off to engage in making out, something that you should not be doing until at least high school, when you have a clear idea of how to kiss. Throughout the movie, Max has a crush on a girl with a really weird name. I think her name is Brixley or something like that. He follows her around. She's much taller, so he has no chance. But yet he follows her around and stares at her awkwardly, and she is surprisingly interested in Max. They actually kiss each other at this party. I'm calling bullshit. That did not happen. There's no way that that would happen. Period. Maybe he'd get to kiss someone, but it wouldn't be a girl who's twice as tall as he is. Girls who are twice as tall as a guy will not make out with that guy. You have to be at least as tall as a woman to kiss her. That's just a fact of nature. Women are genetically incapable of being attracted to men who are not taller than they are. Kids in this movie also are so far gone into degeneracy, and we see that it spreads beyond just the big three characters, that they actually invent a degenerate nihilistic game to determine who kisses who. And this game involves taking a beer bottle and spinning it on the floor. Everybody sits in a circle, they spin the bottle, and whoever spins the bottle has to make out with whoever the bottle lands on. And the reason it's nihilistic and also unrealistic is that these kids don't care who they're kissing. The fact is, when you're in middle school, you have very large prohibitions against kissing strangers. They don't have swingers clubs in middle school for a reason. Anyway, the idea here is that it doesn't matter who you kiss, you got to kiss someone. And that is not how kids that age feel about that. Actually, one thing that I did like about this movie up until a certain point is that Max was really all into Brixley, and he thought that she was his future wife. And it's that kind of idealism which is a realistic portrayal of the pure love of a middle schooler. So this game totally undermined his morality, and it shows that there were other characters that he was becoming friends with increasingly who were even more degenerate and had even gotten creative in their degeneracy by inventing games like this one with the bottle. If this movie had been made properly, then Seth Myers would have made sure that all of these boys were improved by the end, and that they had matured in ways which would set them up for a brighter future. Or at the bare minimum, they would at least break even and make gains to offset their losses. But actually, all of them were not really characters, but rather SJW, communist, and homosexual stereotypes. Each one of them is fulfilling an SJW social destiny rather than being just a group of normal guys who are friends and bring different things to the table. A successful group of friends is one where everyone is a little bit different and they have different skills. A group of people who are all exactly the same, as identity politics of the communist demands, is not a successful social order. Max has now become a serial dater and kisser. While he has proven that he has the ability to get dates, which is always a good thing, he's on a path that leads to teen pregnancy. He's becoming increasingly nihilistic about who he dates. He'll date anybody, and he switches girlfriends like some kids switch pairs of pants. Thor was mentored by a gay teacher, shows no interest in girls at any point, including at a kissing party where he could have had his pick just by spinning a bottle, and really, really likes 80s music. I don't need to say any more, do I? His character is clearly a homosexual. The actor must himself be gay, since we know that kids cannot act. Kid actors are notoriously bad at what they do, so the only way that this kid can portray a homosexual so effectively is if he himself is in fact a homosexual. He's on a path to the gay men's choir. I mean, maybe he's smart enough to not contract AIDS, so maybe he'll just end up being a failed singer who doesn't become the next Justin Bieber, and then after he gets off work at Subway, goes and hangs out with the gay men's choir or plays gay volleyball. You know, it's not a terrible arc, but it's clearly not great either. Lucas is the biggest disappointment of all, because this is someone who has potential. The guy, like I said, is built like a freight train. He's got natural athletic ability just by virtue of his size. He abandons any form of self-improvement or balance, however, and embraces being a soy boy, not even giving himself a chance to break out and win a sports scholarship or become a man who does masculine things. A lot of people who become soy boys are scrawny, so they have no real option, but this guy did, and he gave up on that. His repression of his manhood, however, could end up filling him with rage and make him the next Michael Brown. I fear that if this were a real person, that he would end up on the news as the victim of police brutality, because as a large, scary-looking black guy, he would not know, as a nerd, that other people might find him scary. So then he might wig out if they're out of the newest Tamagotchi or whatever at Kmart, and then security might be called on him and he might still be wigging out and he might get shot. So that's what I mean by this. So anyway, this is why this movie is commie and queer propaganda, and why you should not reward Seth Myers with your money by watching this filth. Until next time, I'm Remarkable Republican, here to bring you the truth with truth-flavored bias, signing out.